I don't care what you claim to be. People like you don't belong here. The hotel manager, Clary, was screaming at the top of her lungs as security forced Will Stryker, the man in a $5,000 tailored suit who had been dragged across marble floors by hotel security while wealthy guests pulled out their phones, to record what they thought was just another piece of entertainment. The crowd of onlookers weren't just watching. They were laughing, recording, treating this man's humiliation like it was some kind of show. But here's what none of them knew. Not Clary. Not the security guards. Not the guests filming with their phones. Not a single person in that lobby had any idea who they were really dealing with. As Wills was being pushed toward the door, he turned back with a calmness that should have terrified everyone in that room. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was something in his tone that cut through all the chaos. He looked directly at Clary and said, "You have no idea what you've just done." 20 minutes. That's all it took for everything to change. 20 minutes for one of the most shocking reversals of power you'll ever hear about. 20 minutes for justice to be served in a way that nobody saw coming. If you want to see how this story ends and witness one of the most satisfying moments of instant karma ever caught on camera, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. But before we get to the explosive conclusion, let me take you back to where this all started. 20 minutes earlier, when Will Stryker had walked into that hotel as just another guest. Or so they thought. If you stand against discrimination, type yes, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. To understand what had happened in that lobby, you need to know exactly who Will Stryker really was. Because the man they had just humiliated and thrown out like common trash? He wasn't just anybody. Will Stryker is 42 years old and the CEO of Stryker Hospitality Group. Let that sink in for a moment. This man owns 47 luxury hotels across the United States. 47. We're talking about a hospitality empire worth over $2 billion. But his story? It didn't start in boardrooms or country clubs. Wills grew up in the projects of Detroit with his grandmother, Rose Stryker. They had nothing. I'm talking about choosing between paying the electric bill or buying groceries, kind of nothing. But Rose Stryker was a woman who refused to let poverty define her grandson's future. She worked 3 jobs: cleaning office buildings at night, doing laundry for wealthy families during the day, and babysitting neighborhood kids on weekends, all to make sure Wills had every opportunity she never had. When Rose was dying, she called Wills to her bedside. Her final words to him were burned into his memory forever. "Promise me you'll show them we belong everywhere." Those weren't just words from a dying grandmother. They became the driving force behind everything Wills would accomplish. From a full scholarship to Harvard Business School, to building his first hotel from a rundown motel he bought with his last $15,000, Wills turned Rose's dying wish into a mission. Every success, every acquisition, every milestone was proof that they belonged everywhere. And every year on Rose's birthday, Wills does something that would shock the business world if they knew about it. He conducts anonymous inspections of luxury hotels. Not his own properties, competitor hotels. He goes undercover, experiencing these places exactly as any other guest would, documenting how they treat people who look like him. Today was Rose's birthday, and the Grand Meridian Hotel wasn't just any random target for his annual inspection. This was the hotel he'd been secretly negotiating to purchase for 6 months, his biggest acquisition ever. A decision worth $300 million was riding on what he discovered during this visit. So when Wills pulled up to the Grand Meridian in a modest rental car, a beat-up Honda Civic instead of the Bentley he usually drives, it was all part of the plan. He wanted to see how they'd treat James Durham, the fake name he'd used to make his reservation. Not Wills Stryker, billionaire CEO. Just James Durham, another black man checking into their hotel. The valet attendant, Jake Hunter, took one look at Wills stepping out of that Honda and couldn't hide his disgust. "You sure you're in the right place, buddy? The Motel 6 is about 10 miles down the road." Just like that, before Wills had even walked through the front door, the discrimination began. Inside, the front desk clerk, Ashley Choi, started friendly enough when she saw an impeccably dressed man approaching. But the moment she looked up and saw Wills's face, everything changed. Her smile disappeared. Her tone went from warm to ice cold. She began typing furiously on her computer, taking twice as long as necessary to process what should have been a simple check-in. The concierge, Liam, wasn't even trying to be subtle. He kept staring at Wills, whispering to other staff members, pointing in his direction. You could feel the tension building with every interaction. When Ashley finally handed over the room key, Wills noticed something immediately. He had paid for a premium suite on the 15th floor. The key she gave him? Room 302. Third floor, the worst floor in the hotel, right above the kitchen and next to the ice machines. But here's what none of them knew. Wills had come prepared. Hidden cameras, audio recording devices, everything he needed to document exactly how the Grand Meridian treated their guests. Every slight, every microaggression, every moment of discrimination was being captured in crystal clear detail. The restaurant hostess, Patricia Vale, looked right at Wills when he approached and said, "We're fully booked tonight." Meanwhile, 3 tables sat completely empty, and she was seating white guests who had walked in after him. At the bar, manager Thomas Reed will Wills order a single glass of water and then cut him off, saying, "I think you've had enough for tonight." 1 water. That's all he had ordered. The pool area security guard, Kevin Brooks, demanded to see Wills's room key 3 separate times in 20 minutes. The same security guard who hadn't asked a single white guest for any identification. At the spa, receptionist Linda Cross suddenly developed computer problems the moment Wills approached. "Oh, our system is down right now. You'll have to come back later." But the white woman standing right behind him? Linda's computer worked perfectly fine for her appointment. Every single interaction was a masterclass in subtle racism. The kind that's hard to prove, easy to deny, but impossible to ignore when you're living it. And through it all, Wills remained calm, polite, and professional. But inside, he was building a case that would bring this entire operation to its knees. What these staff members didn't realize was that they weren't just discriminating against another guest. They were discriminating against the man who was about to become their boss. And every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment of disrespect was being recorded for what would become the most devastating staff meeting in hotel history. But the worst was yet to come. Because what happened next would cross a line that Wills couldn't ignore, setting in motion a chain of events that would destroy careers and change lives forever. The discrimination Wills had been documenting all day was about to reach a breaking point that would shock even him. Because hotel manager Clary was getting phone calls. Lots of them. One by one, her staff was calling with complaints about the black man in room 302. Patricia from the restaurant, "He's making our guests uncomfortable." Thomas from the bar, "He seems suspicious, like he's watching everyone." Kevin from pool security, "I think he might be casing the joint for a robbery." And Clary? She bought every single word of it. In her mind, she had it all figured out. A black man staying at the Grand Meridian, asking too many questions, observing everything. He had to be planning something criminal. There was no other explanation that made sense to her prejudiced worldview. So Clary marched down to the lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to disaster. She spotted Wills sitting calmly in one of the leather chairs, and that was it. She was done playing games. "Excuse me," she said, her voice already raised loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "I'm going to need you to leave immediately." Wills looked up from his phone, confused. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" "I'm a paying guest. My staff has been receiving complaints about your behavior," Clary announced, making sure her voice carried across the entire lobby. "You're making our guests uncomfortable, and frankly, I think you're here for reasons other than legitimate hotel business." The lobby started to quiet down. Other guests were turning to watch what was clearly becoming a scene. Some were already pulling out their phones. Wills remained calm, but you could hear the edge creeping into his voice. "I've done nothing but try to enjoy the amenities I paid for. What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," Clary shot back. "I want you to gather your things and leave. Now." "I'd like to speak to the owner of this hotel," Wills said. his voice still controlled but with a steel underneath that should have warned Clary she was making a massive mistake. That's when Clary laughed. Actually laughed. Right there in front of 30+ witnesses, she threw her head back and laughed like Wills had just told her the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "The owner would never associate with people like you," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Trust me, he has much better things to do than deal with whatever scam you're trying to pull here." The lobby had gone completely silent now. Every guest, every staff member was watching this confrontation unfold. And Wills was documenting every second of it. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. "I'm a paying guest, I have receipts for everything, and I haven't broken any laws or hotel policies." That's when Clary called security. 2 guards appeared within minutes, ready to physically remove Wills from the premises. Even when he showed them his room key, his receipts, his identification, proving he was a legitimate guest, it didn't matter. Clary had made up her mind. "Get him out of here," she ordered. And so they did. 2 security guards grabbed Wills by the arms and started dragging him toward the exit. An impeccably dressed man in a $5,000 suit being physically removed from a hotel lobby while over 30 people watched and recorded on their phones. The humiliation was complete. The racism was undeniable. And everyone in that lobby thought they were witnessing just another case of a black man being put in his place. But as they reached the door, Wills turned back to look at Clary one last time. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was something in his tone that cut through all the chaos and noise. "Tell your owner Will Stryker stopped by." Clary didn't react. The name meant nothing to her. She just stood there, satisfied that she had successfully removed what she considered to be a threat to her hotel's reputation. If you think this story ends with injustice, you need to subscribe right now, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. The tables are about to turn in a way that nobody in that lobby could have possibly seen coming. Wills walked to his car, the Honda Civic that had triggered so much discrimination from the moment he arrived. But once he was safely inside, away from the cameras and the crowds, he did something that would change everything. He made a phone call. "Rebecca, it's Wills. Yes, the inspection is complete. No, we won't be needing any more time to make our decision about the Grand Meridian." Rebecca Foster, his executive assistant, was on the other end of the line, probably expecting to hear about minor service issues or staff training opportunities. She had no idea what she was about to learn. "Sir, should I tell the legal team to continue with the acquisition negotiations?" "Rebecca," Wills said, his voice deadly calm, "the acquisition negotiations ended this morning. We already own the Grand Meridian Hotel. The purchase agreement was signed at 9 a.m., 6 hours before I walked through those doors." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. For 6 months, Wills had been secretly negotiating to buy the Grand Meridian. 6 months of lawyers and contracts and due diligence. The deal had been finalized that very morning, making him the legal owner of the hotel before he even arrived for his inspection. The staff that had just discriminated against him, humiliated him, and physically thrown him out, they all worked for him now. Every single one of them. "Rebecca, I need you to pull all the employment contracts for the Grand Meridian staff, all of them, and schedule an emergency staff meeting for 20 minutes from now." "Sir, what should I tell them the meeting is about?" Wills thought about his grandmother Rose, about her dying words, about the promise he made to show them they belonged everywhere. He thought about every moment of discrimination he had just endured, every slight, every cruel word, every assumption they had made about him. But he also thought about the kind of man Rose had raised him to be. The internal struggle was real. Part of him wanted revenge, wanted to make them all pay for what they had done. But another part of him knew that true justice meant being better than the hatred he had just experienced. "Tell them," Wills said finally, "that the new owner wants to meet his staff." What happened in that staff meeting 20 minutes later would become legendary in the hospitality industry. But the question is, what would you have done in Wills's position? Would you have chosen mercy or justice? Let me know in the comments, because what happens next will test everything you think you know about forgiveness and consequences. 20 minutes later, The Grand Meridian Hotel was about to experience the most shocking reversal in hospitality history. Wills pulled back into the parking lot, but this time he wasn't alone. A convoy of black SUVs followed behind him. Out stepped his legal team, his executive staff, and his head of human resources. This wasn't the same man they had thrown out 20 minutes ago. This was Will Stryker, CEO, returning to claim what was rightfully his. The lobby fell silent as they walked through the front doors. You could feel the confusion rippling through the staff. Wasn't this the man they had just forcibly removed? Why was he back? And who were all these people in expensive suits carrying briefcases and legal documents? Jake Hunter, the valet who had made the snide comment about the wrong entrance, was the first to spot them. His face went pale as he recognized Wills leading this professional entourage through the lobby he had been dragged out of just minutes before. Ashley Choi at the front desk dropped her phone. Liam the concierge stopped mid-conversation with a guest. Patricia from the restaurant came running from the dining room. Thomas left the bar. Kevin abandoned his security post. Linda rushed out of the spa. And Clary? Clary came charging down from her office, ready to call security again, ready to have this man removed for a second time. But something about the scene stopped her in her tracks. The legal team, the executives, the way hotel staff were suddenly looking terrified instead of triumphant. "Attention all staff," Wills announced, his voice carrying across the entire lobby. "I need everyone in the main conference room immediately. Everyone." "Now wait just a minute," Clary started, but one of Wills's lawyers stepped forward and handed her a document. "Ma'am, you'll want to read that very carefully." Clary's eyes scanned the paperwork, and the color drained from her face completely. Her hands started shaking. The document was the official transfer of ownership, signed that morning, making Wills Stryker the legal owner of the Grand Meridian Hotel. The man she had just humiliated, the man she had called security on, the man she had physically thrown out of the building, he was her boss. He owned everything. The hotel, the building, and every single job in it. Word spread through the staff like wildfire. Whispered conversations, panicked glances, the sudden realization that they had all made a catastrophic mistake. But it was too late to take any of it back. In the conference room, 37 staff members sat in stunned silence as Wills walked to the front. Behind him, a large screen displayed the hotel's security system. Every camera angle, every recorded conversation, every moment of discrimination from the past 5 hours. "My name is Wills Stryker," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the owner of this hotel. What you're about to see is footage from my visit here today as an undercover guest." The screen lit up with crystal clear footage of Jake Hunter at the valet stand. "You sure you're in the right place, buddy? The Motel 6 is about 10 miles down the road." Jake's face went white as he watched himself on screen. But Wills wasn't done. Next came Ashley Choi's dramatic attitude change at the front desk, her deliberate slowdown of service, her assignment of Wills to the worst room despite his payment for a premium suite. Then Liam's suspicious stares and whispered conversations with other staff members. Patricia refusing seating at the restaurant. "We're fully booked tonight," while empty tables sat clearly visible in the background. Thomas at the bar, cutting off service. "I think you've had enough for tonight." The timestamp on the footage showed Wills had ordered exactly 1 glass of water. Kevin demanding to see room keys 3 separate times while never asking any white guests for identification. Linda claiming computer problems at the spa while seamlessly helping the next guest in line. Each clip was more damning than the last, and with each piece of footage, Wills called out the staff member by name. "Jake Hunter, valet attendant, your comment about the wrong entrance constitutes discrimination based on race and economic status. Legal implications include violation of federal civil rights laws." Ashley Choi, front desk clerk. "Your deliberate downgrade of accommodations and hostile service represent clear discriminatory practices." Patricia Vale, restaurant hostess, refusing service while claiming full capacity with empty tables visible constitutes discrimination in public accommodations, a federal offense. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of Wills's voice and the damning evidence playing on the screen. Staff members were staring at their hands, some starting to cry, others looking like they might be sick. But the worst was yet to come. The final clip showed Clary in the lobby, screaming for everyone to hear. "I don't care what you claim to be. People like you don't belong here." Followed by her laughing when Wills asked to speak to the owner. "The owner would never associate with people like you." When the footage ended, the silence in that room was deafening. 37 people sat there realizing that their careers weren't just over. They had potentially committed federal crimes. All of it caught on camera. All of it admissible in court. Wills stood at the front of the room, looking at each face, seeing the fear and realization dawning on every single person who had participated in his humiliation. "Some of you," he said quietly, "are about to learn that actions have consequences, and some of you are about to discover what real justice looks like." The question hanging in the air wasn't whether heads were going to roll. It was how many and how far the consequences would reach. Because what happened next went shockwaves through the entire hospitality industry and serve as a warning that discrimination always comes with a price. The silence in that conference room was about to be broken by decisions that would change lives forever. Wills looked around the room at 37 faces, each one representing a choice between justice and mercy, between consequence and forgiveness. The footage had spoken for itself. The evidence was undeniable. Now came the reckoning. "Clary," Wills said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you minus any damages we decide to pursue." Clary's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. The woman who had laughed at the idea of Wills speaking to the owner was now being fired by that very same owner. "Jake Hunter," Wills continued. "Terminated. Your comments about the wrong entrance showed a level of prejudice that has no place in hospitality." Jake put his head in his hands. The job he thought he was protecting with his discrimination had just vanished in an instant. "Liam, Patricia, Thomas, Kevin, Linda." Wills called each name like he was reading a roll call of shame. "All terminated, effective immediately. Your discriminatory actions today weren't just morally wrong, they were potentially criminal. Consider yourselves fortunate that termination is the only consequence you're facing today." One by one, security escorted them out. The same security guards who had dragged Wills from the lobby 20 minutes earlier were now removing the staff members who had orchestrated his humiliation. But then something unexpected happened. "Ashley Choi," Wills said, and Ashley's whole body tensed, preparing for the axe to fall. "Please stay. Everyone else who wasn't directly involved in today's events, you're dismissed." Ashley sat frozen as the conference room emptied, leaving just her, Wills, and his executive team. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, certain that her termination was just being saved for last. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know what I did was wrong. I know there's no excuse, but I need you to understand something." Wills waited, letting her speak. "I didn't want to treat you that way, but Clary had made it clear that any staff member who was too friendly with certain guests would be written up. She said we needed to maintain the hotel's standards. I was scared of losing my job, so I went along with it. I became complicit in something I knew was wrong." Ashley looked up at Wills, her eyes red with tears. "I have 2 kids at home. My mom is fighting cancer. This job is everything to me. But that doesn't excuse what I did to you. You deserved better. Every guest deserves better." Wills studied her face for a long moment. Here was someone taking genuine responsibility, showing real remorse and explaining the toxic culture that had enabled discrimination to flourish. "Ashley," he said finally, "you're keeping your job, but you're also getting a promotion. I'm making you interim front desk manager, and your first responsibility is helping me rebuild this place into what it should have been all along." The relief on Ashley's face was overwhelming, but Wills wasn't done. "We're implementing mandatory diversity and inclusion training for every single employee. Not the kind of corporate checkbox training that doesn't change anything. Real education about respect, dignity, and what inclusive hospitality actually means." Over the next several months, the Grand Meridian underwent a complete transformation. Wills brought in diversity consultants, revised every policy, and rebuilt the staff culture from the ground up. He hired from diverse communities, promoted based on merit and character rather than connections, and made it clear that discrimination in any form would result in immediate termination. The hotel that had once been a symbol of exclusion became a flagship for inclusion. But the most powerful moment came 6 months later, when Wills found himself standing at his grandmother's grave on what would have been her 93rd birthday. "I kept my promise, Grandma Rose," he said quietly, placing fresh flowers on her headstone. "We belong everywhere now, and I'm making sure other people know it too." The transformation of the Grand Meridian became a case study in business schools across the country. The hotel that had once thrown out its own owner because of the color of his skin was now rated the #1 hotel for inclusive service in America. Families of every background walked through those same doors where Wills had been humiliated. Children played in the lobby where he had been dragged out by security. The marble floors that had once echoed with racist slurs now rang with laughter and conversation in dozens of different languages. Wills would often stand in that lobby, watching families check in, watching his diverse staff provide exceptional service to every guest regardless of their race, religion, or background. Sometimes he would think about that day, about the choice between revenge and redemption. He had chosen to build something better instead of just tearing something down. The Grand Meridian's transformation sent ripples through the entire hospitality industry. Other hotels began examining their own practices, their own cultures, their own blind spots. Clary, Jake, and the others who were fired found themselves blacklisted from major hotel chains, their names associated with one of the most public discrimination scandals in recent memory. But Ashley Choi? She became one of the most respected managers in the company, leading diversity initiatives and mentoring new employees on the importance of treating every guest with dignity and respect. Justice had been served, but more importantly, lasting change had been created. The Grand Meridian Hotel stands today as proof that discrimination doesn't pay, that character matters more than color, and that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is building something beautiful in its place. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of standing up against discrimination and choosing to build something better, then you need to subscribe right now because stories like this matter. They remind us that change is possible, that justice can be served, and that sometimes the people who seem powerless hold more power than anyone realizes.